Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you are watching AnewZ Weekend. Let's see the headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrives in the UK ahead of a crucial summit with European leaders right after his clash with US President Donald Trump. Pope Francis's health took a turn on Friday after suffering a bronchospasm that required urgent medical attention. Muslims around the world have welcomed the holy month of Ramadan, a time of fasting, prayer and reflection. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has arrived in London ahead of a major London defense summit with European leaders. Prior to that, he will also meet with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister's office confirmed that the meeting will take place at Downing Street today, where both leaders will discuss the next steps in addressing the ongoing conflict. A spokesperson highlighted the UK's commitment to supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, including a pledge to increase defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. On Sunday, European leaders will gather for a summit focused on securing peace and lasting security guarantees for Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and US President Donald Trump held a tense meeting at the White House where discussions over the war in Ukraine led to a heated exchange. Our correspondent Ubi Schwander reports from Washington, D.C.
President Donald Trump has instructed White House officials to have President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and his delegation to leave the White House after they clashed with the president and vice president during their meetings in the Oval Office on Friday. A planned joint press conference between the two leaders was also canceled following a heated exchange of words between Zelenskyy on one side and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance on the other. Zelenskyy was accused of being insufficiently thankful for the hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. At one point, Vice President J.D. Vance directly confronted Zelenskyy in front of the press, telling him that he doesn't believe that Zelenskyy has ever once said thank you for all the American support. Vice President Vance called Zelenskyy, quote, disrespectful.
You say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems?
President Trump told Zelenskyy, you have to be thankful you don't have the cards and that you're gambling with World War III. Trump was clearly exasperated by Zelenskyy's attitude towards an American negotiated ceasefire with Russia that is yet to take place. At one point in the Oval Office, Trump firmly told Zelenskyy, quote, if you could get a ceasefire, I'm telling you to take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you what
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
The fallout is widely viewed in Washington as having been disastrous for the Ukrainian president. An anticipated mineral mining agreement with the U.S. was supposed to be signed today. That is not happening anymore. President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in his cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. That was President Trump on social media following his meeting with President Zelenskyy. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who had been involved in negotiations with Ukraine, echoed President Trump's frustration, saying that you don't do a negotiation with the president of the U.S. in public like this. President Trump's administration is clearly not happy with President Zelenskyy and what they felt could have been concerns that Zelenskyy has over the peace talks that would have been better hashed out behind closed doors. The White House subsequently released a statement following the Zelenskyy meeting saying that we will never allow the American people to be taken advantage of. It's unclear where President Zelenskyy goes from here, but certainly the fallout of what happened in Washington will be felt in Kyiv. I'm AnewZ for AnewZ, Washington, D.C.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed his clash with U.S. President Donald Trump in an exclusive interview with Fox News. In the interview, Zelenskyy expressed uncertainty about any wrongdoing on his part, stating, quote, "I'm not sure that we did something bad, but acknowledged that the dispute was detrimental to both parties." He emphasized his respect for President Donald Trump and the United States, expressing confidence in the resilience of the long-standing relationship between the two nations. The meeting's fallout has raised questions about future U.S. support for Kyiv.
That our partners with us and that we have security guarantees.
Can Ukraine...
So we are ready for peace, but we have to be in strong position. What does it mean? Just to know that our army is strong, that our partners with us, and that we have security guarantees.
Can Ukraine win this war or hold off Russia without continued U.S. support?
It will be difficult for us. That's why I'm here. That's why we speak about the future negotiations. It will be difficult without your support, but we can't lose. We don't have enough weapon to push them out, and we don't see now, for now, we don't see really big volume of new support from the United States, but with all respect again.
Do you think your relationship with Donald Trump, President Trump, after today, can be salvaged?
Yes, of course, because it's relations more than two presidents. It's the historical relations, strong relations between our people.
The Trump-Zelenskyy meeting has drawn global attention, with analysts highlighting the ongoing complexities of international diplomacy regarding the war. Leaders around the world have reacted to the outcome of the meeting.
World leaders have reacted to the clash between United States President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. The meeting, which was intended to strike a deal that could possibly end Russia's invasion of Ukraine, was brought to an abrupt end after an argument erupted.
God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this.
President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, showed her support for Zelenskyy in a post on social media and vowed to continue working with Ukraine towards a lasting peace. French President Emmanuel Macron and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau both accused Russia of being an aggressor and sided with Ukraine. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz also rallied support for Zelenskyy, saying Ukraine could rely on Germany for support. The Prime Ministers of Sweden and the Czech Republic all backed the Ukrainian president, saying he's fighting for the freedom of Europe. In the US, Senator Chuck Schumer and United States Representative Nancy Pelosi condemned President Trump's actions as contrary to America's long-standing support for democracy around the world and accused him of siding with Russia. Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban thanked Donald Trump for what he described as an attempt to make peace. US Senator Lindsey Graham described the meeting of the two leaders as a complete disaster and called on Zelenskyy to resign. Around the world, people have also commented on the outcomes of the meeting. In Berlin, visitors have expressed embarrassment over the blow-up between the two leaders, calling Trump's behavior atrocious.
I'm embarrassed about what happened in the Oval Office yesterday. All my friends are supportive of Ukraine and of Zelenskyy. That was atrocious behavior on the behalf of the United States President yesterday and the Vice Presidents against a man that we should be very supportive of.
Seoul and Sydney were divided on the heated exchange, with some calling President Trump rude, whilst others thought Zelenskyy was ungrateful.
I had a lot of expectations from Trump that he became the president. But I listened to his talk with Zelenskyy. I felt like he was a little bit rude to Zelenskyy, and he treats security issues as commercial ones. Then I felt it shouldn't be done that way.
It's just crazy the fact that Zelenskyy, he basically rejected the fact that anybody was helping me, and he seemed very ungrateful.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, residents have rallied in support of Zelenskyy, declaring that their nation will prevail even without the help of the United States.
Trump finally understood that Zelenskyy is a president that will not just give up. He is not as simple as that.
It is not Ukraine that is gambling with the Third World War, no. More likely we are being used in this game as a bargaining chip. But we shall overcome, no doubt about that, with or without aid, because we are a nation with a strong spirit.
Zelenskyy also received support from Ukrainian diaspora during his meeting to Washington, where he was met with a standing ovation.
Russian drones struck a medical facility and other sites in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv late on Friday. Local officials reported at least 7 injuries. 9 drones hit civilian areas in 3 districts, damaging homes and a medical center, forcing 56 people to be evacuated. Kharkiv has been a frequent target of drone strikes in the ongoing war. The Trump administration said it's eliminating more than 90% of USAID's foreign aid contracts and $60 billion in overall U.S. assistance around the world. The planned cuts halted thousands of programs, and at least 1,600 USAID staff have been fired. Donald Trump and his advisor Elon Musk claim foreign aid is unnecessary spending. With legal challenges already underway, non-profit organizations warn there could be more contract terminations. The United States has allocated $46.7 billion in financial assistance to post-Soviet countries between 2020 and 2024, with Ukraine receiving over $43 billion of the total funds.
Ukraine, which has been at the center of geopolitical tensions and conflict, received the lion's share of U.S. assistance, totaling $43.076 billion. The funds were primarily directed toward economic development, peace and security, and humanitarian aid. Additionally, Ukraine received $1.068 billion to support democracy, human rights, and governance initiatives. Across all post-Soviet countries, economic development was the most heavily funded category, receiving $29.767 billion, or nearly 64% of the total assistance. Other significant areas of funding included peace and security and humanitarian aid. In contrast, despite the global push for climate action, environmental projects received minimal funding. Only $9.337 million was allocated across all countries, with Ukraine receiving the largest share. Ukraine dominated the funding landscape, with other countries receiving substantially less. Moldova was the second largest recipient, with $698.3 million, followed by Georgia, $663.8 million, and Tajikistan, $371.4 million. Armenia received $329.3 million, while Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan were allocated $261.9 million and $245.3 million respectively. At the lower end of the spectrum, Russia received the least amount of funding, totaling just $13.1 million, primarily for economic development and health initiatives. This reflects the strained relations between the US and Russia in recent years. The funding was distributed consistently over the 5-year period, with significant increases in certain categories during critical years. For example, Ukraine's economic development funding surged in 2022, reaching $8.605 billion as the country faced heightened conflict and economic challenges. Similarly, humanitarian aid to Ukraine peaked in 2022 at $1.190 billion, reflecting the urgent need for support following the escalation of the war. The US also prioritized democracy and governance programs across the region. Armenia received $122.2 million for democracy development, human rights and governance initiatives, while Georgia was allocated $160.7 million in this category. Belarus, on the backdrop of its strained relations with the West, received $62.8 million for similar programs. The US was prioritizing Ukraine in its foreign aid agenda, especially following Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. The Biden administration had framed this assistance as critical to supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and countering Russian aggression. However, the sheer scale of funding to Ukraine, over 90% of the total aid to post-Soviet countries, has sparked debates about the effectiveness and equity of US aid distribution. Critics argue that the overwhelming focus on Ukraine has come at the expense of other post-Soviet states that also face significant economic, political, and security challenges. For instance, Moldova and Georgia, both of which have struggled with Russian influence and internal instability, received less than $700 million each over the 5-year period. Moreover, the lack of significant funding for environmental initiatives across the region raises concerns about the long-term sustainability of US aid. With climate change posing a growing threat to the region, the minimal allocation of $9.3 million for environmental projects appears disproportionate to the scale of the challenge. Some analysts argue that the distribution of US aid has been strategically directed towards sectors that amplify American soft power in the region. Programs focused on democracy, governance, and economic development are seen as tools to promote US values and influence, particularly in countries like Ukraine, Georgia, and Armenia, which have expressed aspirations for closer ties with the West. However, this approach has drawn criticism for prioritizing geopolitical interests over the immediate needs of local populations, such as healthcare, education, and environmental sustainability. The future of US foreign aid to the region remains uncertain, particularly with the Trump administration's policies. The US president raised serious skepticism toward foreign aid, pushing for significant cuts and emphasizing a more transactional approach to international relations. As a result, many of the US-funded programs in post-Soviet countries, particularly those reliant on consistent financial support, are facing disruption or termination. This raises critical questions about the sustainability of projects that depend on US funding. For example, initiatives aimed at strengthening democratic institutions, supporting civil society, or rebuilding infrastructure in conflict-affected areas like Ukraine are left in limbo. Similarly, countries like Moldova and Georgia, which have relied on US assistance to counter Russian influence and bolster their economies, may struggle to fill the funding gap.
Protesters gathered in Serbia's southern city of Niš on Friday evening ahead of mass demonstrations in the city in the ongoing wave of protests sweeping the Balkan country. Student-led protests have been held regularly since November, when a canopy at a newly renovated train station collapsed, killing 15 people. Many Serbians blame the tragedy on government corruption, an allegation the authorities strongly deny. The protests in Serbia have been steadily growing, with support pouring in from different parts of the country. Protesters from the capital, Belgrade, and the second largest city, Novi Sad, where the train station collapse occurred last year, have joined the demonstrations in Niš. Many arrived by bicycle or on foot, symbolizing their determination to bring about change.
They now need some strength, some independent, non-oppositional and non-positional strength, some experts, some of their professors to come together to advise them, to make a plan. They now need support, and after this, they should all go to Belgrade together, all together to the parliament, and then they need some plan that they cannot have alone.
Another protester, Rasko Djordjevic, who traveled from Novi Sad, highlighted the significance of the movement, comparing it to a historic moment in Serbia's past.
In the modern history of Serbia, on the overall national level, there has never been such a significant event. I don't think we'll find that level of unity and collective awareness of the need for change since the first Serbian uprising. In addition to all the constitutional changes, all the historical events, this, on an individual level, where every person, every village, every municipality has some awareness that something needs to change, I don't think we have had that before.
As protests continue to grow, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and other high-ranking officials have accused the Western nations of fueling the unrest to destabilize Serbia. Vučić has labeled the demonstrations as Western-backed attempts to overthrow him, vowing they will not succeed. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Vulin has gone further, alleging that Western intelligence agencies are attempting to stage a so-called color revolution in the country. Pope Francis's health took a turn on Friday after suffering a bronchospasm that required urgent medical attention. The Vatican says he remains alert and responsive. The 88-year-old pontiff experienced vomiting, which led to some inhalation, affecting his breathing. Doctors at Rome's Gemelli Hospital performed a procedure to clear his airways and placed him on non-invasive mechanical ventilation. His oxygen levels improved after the treatment, and he later underwent respiratory therapy. While his condition is stable, doctors say the next 24 to 48 hours will be critical in assessing his recovery. Muslims around the world have welcomed the holy month of Ramadan, a time of fasting, prayer and reflection. From the Middle East to Europe and the United States, different communities are marking the occasion in unique and meaningful ways.
Ramadan, the holiest month in Islam, is observed by over 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide. It's a time of fasting from dawn to sunset, increased prayer, Quran recitation and acts of charity. The month ends with Eid al-Fitr, a joyous celebration marking the completion of fasting. In Egypt, thousands of worshippers gathered at Cairo's historic mosque for the first Tarawih prayer, a special night prayer performed throughout Ramadan. In Turkey, the spiritual atmosphere filled Istanbul's iconic mosques, including Hagia Sophia, Sultanahmet and Süleymaniye, as worshippers came together in prayer. In Gaza, Palestinians prayed on the ruins of the Al-Libani Mosque, destroyed in Israeli airstrikes. This Ramadan follows a ceasefire agreement between Tel Aviv and Hamas after months of war that killed over 48,000 people. Despite the devastation, Gazans embrace the holy months with resilience. Meanwhile, in Syria, this Ramadan is particularly significant as a first since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Worshippers gathered at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, reviving religious life in the city. Markets were bustling with Ramadan preparations, despite economic challenges. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the tradition of firing cannons to mark the start of fasting continues. In Sarajevo, families and children gathered at the Yellow Fortress, releasing balloons in celebration. In Germany, Cologne's Wenlier Street was decorated with Ramadan-themed lights, an initiative by the Ramadan project that started last year. The illuminated messages will remain throughout the months. In London, worshippers filled the Azizia Mosque for the first Tarawih prayer. Across the Atlantic in the US, Chicago's Little Palestine community gathered on Harlem Avenue to welcome Ramadan with Islamic hymns, Quran recitations and festive treats. As Ramadan begins, Muslims worldwide unite in faith and devotion, embracing a time of prayer, generosity and spiritual renewal.
That's all for now. Thank you for joining us and keep watching AnewZ.